Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the 5th Annual Aphasia Conference. Woo! This is our 5th conference, and the topic is mental health and hope. And I think most of this topic was picked by many of you when we did the survey last year. So I am glad that we were already at top of everything before this became popular. So we already knew this. So thank you for joining. I want to thank Ben and Alyssa. These are the behind the scenes people that make this happen for the conference, and I couldn't do it without them. And of course, I am so grateful and thankful for the sponsors, Rhode Island Department of Health. We also had National Aphasia Association, NAA, and we also are happy to say that we have CEUs available, and if interested, you can check out the chat box, and that is being sponsored by CareLink and RISHA. Thank you, and those are ASHA CEUs. Again, the reason we are doing this is for the people that I am best thankful for you attending and sharing the knowledge, all of my aphasia friends, family, and friends. Thank you. Let me see what else I have. We will record it. We will edit it when Ben and I have some time after I relax. We're going to edit it and it'll be shared in our website. For those that have registered, you'll receive an email right away. Now, when it's ready, you'll get an email saying, check out the website. We also will be sending out a survey. Give me a few weeks to do that. Again, I'm going to need a vacation after this month. Okay. And I am now going to say thank you to Deb and Steve for wrapping up this conference with an amazing presentation from amazing people that inspire me to keep going every day. Steve and Deb, take it away.
Woo!
I know that voice, Michael.
Yes.
All right, let's see if 3 years after COVID started, I still have to hope that I'm doing this screen share right. Hang on just a sec.
Hi, Jody.
All right, are we visible?
Hey, it's great.
Yes, you're good.
All right, hang on. I think you probably have a black strip coming over it.
We see it fine. Michael, we're going to ask you to mute yourself right now so that we can get the whole clearing of the presentation. But
Okay.
when you have, okay, thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I am Deb Meyerson. Happy to be here today.
And I'm Steve Zuckerman, Deb's husband, care partner, and as I usually say, lesser half. We're going to take you through some slides, and then we really look forward to the conversation at the end. And we're only sorry we didn't join many of the other sessions, but being on West Coast time, they were a little early for our blood. All right, let's see if we can.
This let's started the short exercise. Who are you? How do you describe yourself?
So Ben has been kind enough to try to master the technology here, and just caveat, recognize this may be a little difficult for some folks with aphasia. But what Mike is going to do is he's going to just randomly assign everybody on the call into little meeting groups of 2 people. So just 2 of you in a little breakout session. And the goal is for each of you to just spend a minute or so introducing yourself to the other person. And hopefully you get somebody you don't know. If you get somebody you know, that's okay too. And for those who have a little word finding trouble, just do your best and describe yourself to the other person. So Ben, is that something we can do? I don't know why I'm not. Okay, there we go. So hopefully that worked for everybody. And people got to know each other a little bit. And I think, you know, if we were all in one room, we'd try to get some responses back and forth. But, you know, the big question is, how do you describe yourself? And a lot of people tend to talk about what they do, you know, their role in life. It was very interesting. We had a chance to share with Don, and he kind of went very quickly to some of those other things,
Yeah.
like his values and what's important to him. And we'll say, Don, that in all of our doing of this exercise, that's the first time somebody jumped there so quickly, and that's really cool. Kind of, we like to say, what would your best friend say when you think about how you define yourself? Would your friends think of you the same way? Your spouse or partner, your kids, you know, other people who are close to you, would they think of you and describe you the same way you did? And time. If we did this exercise 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, how would what you have said differed? So those are just all kinds of things to think about, and Deb's gonna go a little deeper there.
In 2009, I was a professor at Stanford. I encouraged students to explore the topics like gender, race, and identity. In 2010, I had a severe stroke. It paralyzed me in the right side. It robbed me of all speech. I had to relearn how to walk, how to make a sound, how to say my name. My strokes took so much out of me: independence, control, my career, and so much more. But I had to get, I was the same person, so I had to get my capabilities back. For 3 years, I worked my ass off. The hardest job I ever had. With all this work, I still didn't regain all my capabilities. I couldn't be a Stanford professor anymore. My aphasia didn't let me to do the job. So 3 years after my stroke, I lost tenure. This was a huge blow. What I do, who am I now? How do I, my identity crisis began. I struggled, really struggled. I didn't know what to do. I had that I felt lost. I still felt like an academic. I wanted it to be an academic, but I lost my job at Stanford. The bad news, I was holding on my old identity. I felt I kept looking at the past work I knew I no longer did can do. It's good news that the
Maybe.
it made me look at the book I wrote in 2001, Tempered Radicals. The identity is the big part of my story. I knew about a lot about identity. I studied in school. I researched and wrote about it. I taught my students about it. But yet, here I was struggling my old identity. Writing identity theft, it was so hard, really hard. It took me 5 years, and I learned to accept lots of help. That it became my learning journey. It helped me rebuild my identity, all the identity,
Owen.
own identity. No one told me about rebuilding the identity is so important. It's so important, so important.
So I'll jump in and just share a little bit more about the book. You know, Deb never wanted to write a memoir. It wasn't about just telling her story. And as she said, she was an academic. So she interviewed 25 other survivors, another 35 care partners, friends, family, professional caregivers. It was really important to Deb to share a diversity of stroke experiences. We love the expression that someone used once in a meeting we were in. When you've met one stroke survivor, you've met one stroke survivor. And everybody's experience is different. And it was important for Deb to try to bring that out as much as she could.
Here is Trish.
Hey, Trish,
Yeah.
look who's on our slide.
Hey!
So, you know, in the interest of time, I'm not going to tell all these stories. I wish I could just hand it over to you, Trish, and let you tell your story. But, you know, these are 3 of the 25 survivors that were interviewed for the book, and they're so different. Men, women, people of color, people with aphasia, without aphasia, people who recovered enough to go back to their previous employment, and others who didn't. And that diversity is so important to understand, to realize that each and every one of you who are survivors and care partners, your journey is different. Your journey is yours. But even with all that diversity, there were 2 things that struck us as being incredibly similar. One is that everybody we talked to worked their tail off for years, not 6 months, not 12 months, but for years. And so we are just passionate advocates to break the trope of most of the recovery happens in the first 6 to 12 months. Yes, that's when the recovery is fastest, but if people want to keep working, and Deb is living proof, as are so many of you, that if you keep working, you can continue to regain capabilities. The second thing was what Deb pointed out, which was nobody talked about getting guidance and help on this emotional journey to rebuild their identity in the face of change. And that just really struck us as just a crime. Deb, very quickly, Deb's a social scientist, and I don't know how many of you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It was a social scientist developed this in the 1940s, not to describe stroke survivors or people with disabilities, but as a framework for what motivates people, what motivates human beings. And that if your basic needs aren't met, that's what motivates you. But as those are met, you can be motivated by your psychological needs and then your self-fulfillment needs. And what Deb realized was that her stroke knocked her from the higher rungs of this pyramid right back down to the bottom, where she needed help for her basic needs. But once she was making progress there was no reason she couldn't start climbing back up the pyramid. Have to do it differently, but she could climb. And that was obviously a huge thing for us. I know that 2 weeks ago, we were just talking this morning, 2 weeks ago, you had a session on how strokes affect families. And, you know, that was so clear to us. And chapter 9 of the book, and please excuse me if I start tearing up, I do just even when I talk about it, it starts with our daughter who was 15 when Deb had the stroke. And when she was 17 and in her senior year in high school, she gave a talk about her experience of the stroke. And she, you know, one, it was unbelievably painful for us to hear how much she had suffered, but then it was also incredibly rewarding because she talked about her journey from thinking that being strong meant gutting it out and going it alone and doing everything the same way in the face of Deb's stroke, to seeing how Deb started to accept help. And then she started to let her friends in, and she realized that strength is not toughing it out. It's being vulnerable. It's allowing your community to support you. And, you know, so not only did her life change, she changed. This identity journey is not just for the survivor, it's for all of us in the family and close to the survivor. So, you know, Deb talked about the fact that her disabilities forced her out of her job at Stanford, but it didn't force the professor out of her. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to Professor Deb.
Identity is our narrative about ourselves ever over time. We have not one static identity. Yeah. Our identities are complicated.
Take time, clear your throat.
That we all have multiple identities. I had to remember that I am more than a job at Stanford. I am a mother, wife, daughter, friend, teacher. I love biking, walking, sailing. I had to think about all the things that makes me me. Identities change. We are changing all the time. Right before the stroke, I was not the same person I was 5 years before or 10 years before. My stroke changed me faster. But I am changing anyway. Denny,
Ooh. Technology gone rogue.
Denny is Denny is the social construct. We are and the concept of relationships. My relationships, my friends, family, and colleagues are the big part of making me who I am. Most important, Jenny, is the choice. Instead of asking who I am now, ask who I want to be now. So forced me to slow down. I had to choose how to think about my future. Your sense of self, your identity is profoundly affected by your situation, your race, gender, social status, and more.
So it turns out that after writing Identity Theft and that journey, getting it published in April of 2019 wasn't the finish line. It was really just the starting line. We saw this gap and we just couldn't not try to do something about it, feeling like something about our place in the world put us in the place where we could have an impact in helping make the stroke recovery system better for survivors. So we created Stroke Onward, not expecting anybody to read the small print on this slide. That's just a snapshot of our website homepage, or the top of it anyway, and really organized ourselves to figure out how to address that gap and what we could do about it. Won't talk too long, but just very quickly, our mission is that stroke survivors and their supporters, their families or close friends working with them, get the resources they need to rebuild their lives with whatever disabilities remain after recovering as many as they can. And really the vision that we hope to be able to help move the system toward a little bit is a system that fully supports every survivor's emotional journey in recovery. So that's kind of what we're working at, and we hope to engage with many, if not all of you, to do that. We're doing 3 things, and we're trying to raise awareness. When you identify a gap, you got to let people know. We're doing whatever we can to do that. One of the big things we're doing is writing a column for the American Stroke Association Stroke Connection newsletter. They've got a lot more reach than we do so far. Maybe someday we'll have as much as they do. And just trying to, excuse me. Deb tells me to drink, I drink. Trying to talk about these issues whenever and wherever we can. One of the challenges is once people identify it as a problem, are there resources to help? So we, in collaboration with lots of others, are trying to build a pool of resources and help people find them easily. One of the big ones we've done so far that Jody Kravitz, our colleague who's on the line, really drove was creating book discussion guides to make identity theft more accessible so people could read it together and have some prompted conversation.
And the audiobook is really important.
I'll do a little bit of an aside to just make sure you all know that significant parts of Deb's identity are the same as they were before. The first publisher we talked to and who agreed to publish the book, we said, well, we really want it to be on audiobook because for our audience, there'll be a lot of people for whom that'll be important. And he said, well, let's put it out on paper first and we'll see how it's doing. And if it's doing well, then we can do the audiobook. And Deb looked at me and said, looked back at him and said, you're fired.
Yeah.
So we found another publisher who would do the audiobook from day one. But then ultimately, as we talked, our goal is to change the system. And there are so many ways to change the system, and we know that will take decades. But already we're doing things like through some just fabulous partners, and don't know if any of them are on the call, speech therapists who are faculty who teach future speech therapists are starting to build the book into their curriculum so that the next generation of speech therapists will enter the workforce with a sense of the importance of rebuilding identity and the emotional journey. So those are the kinds of programs we're trying to do. We do want to come back for a minute to the first pillar, raising awareness. And
Yeah. I love the 1 year ago today. The Stroke Across America was a bike ride for us, the US and Canada, to raise the awareness about stroke, brain injury, and aphasia. We rode 4,500 miles over 100 days from Oregon to Boston. We wanted to spotlight the emotional journey after stroke. How do we rebuild our identities and live meaningful lives? We hosted 16 community events across the country. They brought together survivors, families, friends, care professionals, and more. It was so inspiring to be with all these people. Living in community and collaborating with others is the only path to real change. And Michael is the one of Michael is one of the writers. We had the core team of 6 writers and others who joined us, persons to write. We became a family. I didn't expect that.
And with that, I get to see Michael's big, broad smile in his car, I think. Always on the move, that Michael Obelomia. But just a little bit more about the team. So many of you know Michael, and it was just a true pleasure and honor to get to know Michael over 85 days we spent together. Michael had to join 2 weeks in because his son was graduating from college right during the beginning of the trip. Michael is just a force of nature. And I think we're going to get to hear from him a little bit right at the end. And then kind of stooping down in the front, looking at it right of the picture in the black helmet, is a young woman named Whitney Hardy, who's a very, very close family friend. She was 4 months old at our wedding. And she unfortunately, several years after graduating from college, was hit by a car while jogging and had a traumatic brain injury and suffers from some cognitive and memory issues. And she was able to come along. This was a huge rebuilding of her life event. And we were just thrilled that we were able to include her on the trip. The two younger women stooping down in the white and green helmets were both students, Emily and Alex, students at WashU St. Louis, who came along as interns, and they alternated. One rode, one worked each day. The one who was working drove. And boy, well, about a week into the trip, they said, Steve, Deb, do you mind if we call you Mom, Dad 2.0? And they really have become family. And, you know, it's just such a reminder of the importance of diversity. They brought a perspective and an energy and an enthusiasm that really changed the course of the trip. There was one more member of the team, and that was Rusty, our emotional support queen. That's our golden doodle. So far, she's staying quiet on the floor during this presentation, but who knows, we may get to introduce her later. But she rode some in a wagon behind our bike, most often in the support vehicle. But as we like to say, she was ready with a cuddle for anybody who needed it along the way. In the spirit of a picture is worth 1,000 words, we're going to see if we can get technology to cooperate and just play a short video for those who haven't seen it to kind of bring the trip to life.
Tell me of the man of Steve and Deborah, the cyclists. You are loved. Cycling across America, 4,300 miles.
This initiative, this project takes advocacy and awareness to a national level of awareness.
So we're 50 miles into a 76-mile day.
How do you go from a professor who teaches about creating change and using your voice and an athlete to somebody who's disabled fully on your right side and can't speak? And how do you reconcile that with how you saw yourself beforehand?
I am Deb Meyerson. 2010, I had this severe stroke.
We're climbing. We're climbing. Do, 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 do.
Stroke Onward is about raising awareness around the importance of the emotional journey of rebuilding identity, and that is a critical part of the recovery process. But we decided very early on that we wanted to have a broader purpose to the trip to make it more relevant to more people, more easily accessible to more people. And so we really structured it around raising awareness for stroke, for aphasia, which is very poorly understood in the United States, and the importance of the emotional journey and rebuilding identity.
My name is Maggie Whittam, and I had a stroke 7.5 years ago.
Doctors told me wheelchair for life and no talking. I believed them. 4 long years.
It is a loss of the ability to communicate. It is not a loss of intellect. And that is so important for people to understand. And unfortunately, that's not how people are treated.
I don't want this trip to end.
2 rules. 1, never quit. 2, never quit.
think about what's next.
So that's my wife, Deb. We were not even halfway done with the trip and she was already thinking about what's next. So I don't know why our computer is running very slowly here. So, you know, the trip, we learned a ton. We meeting with people, talking with people, thinking a lot, needless to say, 4,500 miles with our heads about 8 inches apart. We had lots of time to talk about what was important to us and where we wanted things to go. So we really came back from that trip incredibly energized, and sometimes I think to the consternation of our small team at Stroke Onward, committed to doing more and doing it faster. And so we're really working on building our team so that we can try to do that. And I think that, and this is kind of spot on to the theme of hope and mental health. That's what we kept hearing was this is a mental health issue, that while stroke is often treated, and it is at the beginning, as a critical care urgency, it becomes a chronic condition for most survivors that you all now live with for life, and we as supporters live with for life. And it deserves the kind of mental health support that chronic conditions in our system generally get, but for some reason, the stroke care system has never figured out how to move it from that critical care condition to the chronic condition that it is. So that's a big part of our focus now. Couple of the things we're doing, you know, we're really looking at counseling skills and creating curriculum. We're training. We've partnered with a Great Aphasia Center, the Adler Aphasia Center, and Jody just mentioned Blaze Morrison being on a support call this morning. He was our other collaborator to develop training for mental health professionals on how they can effectively support people with aphasia. And we've now done 2 rounds of that, and led by Jody, are trying to figure out with our collaboration team how to push that forward and try to scale it so that it can train more people. And then you keep hearing me mention Jody. Needless to say, she's doing a lot of work these days. She's been leading what we're calling a mental health learning tour, really trying to talk to anybody in the mental health professions across all the different professions to understand what their experience is with people with stroke. Why, if they don't have it, why not? What are the barriers? What are the opportunities? And what might we be able to do to help create more support for stroke survivors and people with aphasia around emotional health? Passing it back to Deb.
Chapter 7, identity theft, is called is grief. For many years after my recovery, no one told me about grieving. I didn't offer any support to be to grieve.
Take a deep breath.
Reading Identity Theft, we found grief literature really helpful. I was grieving I grieving my loss of my old capabilities, grieving the loss of my old life, grieving the loss of my old self. I am still grieving these things. But I don't want to just stuck in this place of grieving. So I try to move forward every day. I work to rebuild my life. This is a great year for us. The sons are going to be married 3 weeks from now.
So both our sons, Danny and Adam, are getting married this year to wonderful women. We've told both boys they better not screw it up, because if they do, we're keeping the girls. But Danny's getting married in 3 weeks, Adam at the end of the year. And we went to New York to spend a weekend with Danny and his fiancee, Divya, and to meet her parents, Aram and Selvi, and her brother, Tavin. And it was great. We had a fantastic weekend. Deb also went to a conference while we were back east at Harvard Business School with a lot of her old colleagues, and was able to participate in some inspiring talks about race and gender. We got to spend some time with my mom, who's 94, and we don't see her as much as we would like, being across the country. So in so many ways, it was just a great, great trip. And on the way home, Deb was really down.
I was so tired. I was so frustrated. I couldn't engage everyone I used to be. I slowed the group walking. That the week is great, and the week it makes me grave.
Yeah, go.
I am still I will the emotional journey. It's
I will have to live.
yeah, I have to live with emotional conflicting emotions like these with the rest of my life. I was grieving my old loss of my capabilities. I was grieving loss of my old life, but I want to first new life that push forward to rebuild my old new life. I am so
Struggling to find words. You want me to take it over?
yeah.
Yeah, so just that she is grieving, but she's also working to rebuild a new life that she really enjoys, that stretches her to grow. And in doing that, will consistently put her face to face with her loss And
Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's really bad.
reality. So a few months ago, I mentioned the column we write. We wrote a column about these conflicting emotions, and that what Deb and I realize is that that's just going to be part of life, that by pushing ourselves to live a life we want to live, it's going to remind us of how that's different from the life we used to live. And that's going to lead us to grieve the old loss. But that the solution to that isn't to avoid those trigger events, because if we avoid those trigger events, that means we're just putting ourselves in a box to live a constrained life, and we don't want to do that. So the real goal is, how do we acknowledge and embrace those conflicting emotions and just try to get through that cycle faster and faster and faster? How to get out of grief and be able to pull ourselves back and say, yes, we can't dance the same way at this wedding that we would have 15 years ago, but damn, it's great that we're here. And it's great that we can enjoy it in so many ways. And that cycle of grief, as we've come to call it, is something that we just have to live with and manage. And that, when I say just, I don't mean to suggest it's easy. It's not. It's really hard. And it's something that we'll just have to keep working on for the rest of our lives. And now I've lost my cursor. Where'd it go? Oh, I gotta touch the keypad. Okay.
I have to live with the managing them. I have to I need help managing them. Every survivor deserves this help.
And that's why we're focusing so much of our energy on how does that help become just part of the stroke recovery system of care.
Who am I now? I am alive. For this, I'm grateful and lucky. Many things have changed. I live with disabilities. My right hand doesn't work. I walk with a limp. My speech is so difficult, really difficult today. And a lot of my life is no longer available. But and many things haven't changed. I share the same values, love the same family, work with the same determination. I am building a different kind of a career. I have new limits, but I am again active mother, partner, and athlete. I am still rebuilding my identity and rebuilding my life.
So we just hope that in some way we can work with all of you to change the system so that the system recognizes and supports this kind of emotional journey, the journey to rebuild identity and rewarding lives after stroke, or for that matter, after any trauma.